Have you ever wondered what insanity really looks like on the world's deadliest mountain? Because on K2, it's not the cold that kills you. It's the decisions, the ego, the madness that takes over when the oxygen runs out, and you start to believe you're invincible. Imagine this. You're hanging from a frozen rope at 8,000 meters, the wind screaming louder than your heartbeat when you realize the anchor holding you isn't attached to anything. That's not fiction. That's one of 5 real moments on K2, so reckless, so unbelievable, they cost climbers their lives. These aren't stories of accidents. They're stories of people who chose to dance with death, who looked straight into the face of the savage mountain and dared it to strike back. Over the next few minutes, we'll uncover 5 of the craziest, most shocking moments ever witnessed on K2. Each one a brutal reminder that the mountain never forgives. So before we begin, if you love true mountain stories that reveal the dark side of human ambition, hit subscribe to K2 Stories. Because once you step onto this mountain with us, you'll never see climbing the same way again. They call K2 the Savage Mountain for a reason, because every rule of survival bends the moment you step onto its slopes. Unlike Everest, where 1,000 climbers march each year in neat lines, K2 stands almost alone, wrapped in silence, violence, and storms that can crush a camp in minutes. Our story begins in the summer of 2008, a season etched into mountaineering history as one of the darkest ever recorded. That year, 11 climbers from across the world set their sights on the summit. They came from South Korea, Norway, Nepal, France, and Pakistan, each one believing they could conquer the unconquerable. But by the time the sun rose 2 days later, bodies hung frozen along the bottleneck, a narrow, 80-degree chute of ice that stands between life and the summit. The first crazy thing on K2 that cost lives was belief in perfect weather. The forecast looked clear, the winds calm. For climbers, that's the holy signal. Go now or never. But K2 doesn't follow forecasts. Up there, the mountain makes its own weather. As teams pushed higher that night, the calm turned into something else, an eerie stillness that climbers describe as the mountain holding its breath. Then came the avalanche. Chunks of ice the size of cars broke loose above the bottleneck, slicing through ropes, knocking climbers off balance, cutting their only way down. One moment of trust in a forecast, and 11 people vanished into the void. That was the first lesson. On K2, never trust calm skies. The second insane thing, the summit fever. Even when disaster strikes, even when friends fall, something inside climbers refuses to turn back. It's not bravery, it's obsession. When the ropes were destroyed that night, a handful of survivors made a fateful choice to keep going up. Just one more hour, someone said. We're almost there. They summited at dawn, exhausted, dehydrated, hallucinating from lack of oxygen. They raised flags, took photos, and sealed their fate. Because what they didn't realize was this: going up is optional. Coming down is mandatory. By the time they started descending, the ice had hardened into glass. The sun cooked the snow into slush, and the fixed lines that should have guided them were gone. Imagine being at 8,600 meters, where every breath feels like fire, and realizing you are completely lost, hanging on an invisible thread of hope. Sherpas shouted into the wind, calling for missing climbers. Radios crackled with panic. No one knew who was still alive, and those who were began to see things that weren't real. Faces in the snow, voices calling from below. K2 was breaking them. Mind first, then body. The third crazy thing that costs lives on K2? Leaving your safety to others. Some climbers trusted ropes placed by earlier teams, never checking if they were secure. But those ropes had been slashed by falling ice. They were threadbare, brittle, invisible traps. When one Korean climber clipped in and leaned back, the rope snapped. He dropped hundreds of meters, vanishing into the night. At base camp, no one could sleep. The radio calls had stopped. All that remained was silence and the distant roar of wind that sounded like screaming. Survivors stumbled down days later, frostbitten, hollow-eyed, and broken. Some were found sitting upright in the snow, still wearing their goggles, as if frozen mid-thought. And yet, after all of that, climbers still came back, still believed they could beat the mountain, Because on K2, logic doesn't survive long, only obsession does. That was the year K2 reminded the world of its cruel truth. You don't climb the savage mountain, it lets you climb it for a while. Then it decides how you leave. But this was only the beginning, because the craziest things on K2 weren't all buried in the past. Some of them happened just recently, and what those climbers did next defied every rule of reason. By 2022, technology had changed. Climbers carried drones, satellite trackers, oxygen sensors, even live streams from the mountain. But one thing never changed: K2's hunger. Every year it waited patiently for the next group of dreamers to challenge it. And that summer, hundreds arrived. They wanted to make history, to film it, to post it. K2 had become the new Everest, only deadlier, prouder, and far less forgiving. The world saw a viral image that year, a line of climbers waiting under the bottleneck, a queue of colorful suits stretching across a ridge no wider than a dinner plate. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful. But every climber in that photo knew the truth. One wrong step, one loose crampon, and you don't fall for seconds. You fall for a lifetime. That day would become the stage for the fourth craziest thing on K2. Human traffic in the death zone. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? A traffic jam at 600 meters. But it happened, and it cost lives. As climbers waited in line, their oxygen tanks ticked down second by second. Frozen wind lashed at their faces. Every minute of delay meant blood turning sluggish, frostbite creeping deeper. But no one wanted to move back. Everyone wanted the summit photo. Everyone wanted glory. In the middle of that frozen queue was a young Pakistani porter named Muhammad Hassan. He wasn't a professional mountaineer. He was there to help carry ropes, poorly equipped, underpaid, and desperate to feed his family. Some said he didn't even have the right boots. As the line crept forward through the night, Muhammad slipped. A single misstep, and he hung upside down beneath the trail, tangled in his harness, gasping for breath. Above him, dozens of climbers looked down. Below him, thousands of meters of black emptiness. What happened next shocked the world. Some tried to help, others stepped past him, focused on their summit goal. The temperature dropped, his body froze in place, and while climbers continued upward, his lifeless form hung there for hours, a haunting reminder that on K2, compassion dies first. The internet exploded with outrage when footage emerged weeks later. People asked, how could they climb past him? But up there, reason doesn't work the same. At that altitude, survival instinct is raw. You can't think, can't move, can't breathe. Every second helping someone might mean your own death, and yet deep down, everyone knew. It wasn't just the mountain that killed Muhammad. It was the madness of ambition. That tragedy revealed the fifth crazy thing on K2, treating life like a stepping stone to fame. Cameras kept rolling even as death unfolded. Posts appeared online within days. Summit photos flooded Instagram, while Muhammad's body still hung frozen to the rope below. The mountain didn't react. It didn't roar or rage. It simply stood there watching quietly, as if to say, "You've learned nothing." Back at base camp, a storm rolled in. Tents collapsed. Drones froze mid-air. And one climber, a veteran named Anatoly, whispered to a reporter, "K2 isn't about courage anymore. It's about who dies on camera." For days, silence consumed the camp. No one celebrated. Even those who reached the summit returned hollow, their triumph drowned beneath the weight of what they'd seen. That was the modern K2, where survival isn't about strength, but morality, where every step toward the top costs someone, somewhere, a life. And yet, every year, more people come, drawn not by victory, but by something darker, something that whispers to them from the shadows of that mountain. Because once you've looked at K2, really looked at it, it doesn't leave you alone. There's a strange moment every climber describes when they re-high on K2. When the wind stops and everything goes completely silent. No sound, no movement. Just the weight of the mountain pressing against your chest, as if it's listening to you breathe. That's when the madness begins. It was July 2023, 1 year after Muhammad Hassan's death. A new wave of climbers arrived, determined to prove that K2 could still be conquered with honor. Among them was Luca Ferretti, an Italian mountaineer who had summited Everest 3 times. He came to K2 saying, "I want to climb with my soul, not my ego." But on K2 even souls get tested. The first 3 camps went smoothly. Perfect weather. Stable snow. The team laughed, shared stories, and filmed everything. Vlogs, reels, updates for sponsors. But as they pushed toward Camp 4, things began to change. The air grew thin, their faces frostbitten, their eyes bloodshot from the glare. And then, the rope line vanished. It was supposed to lead straight toward the bottleneck. Instead, the fixed ropes ended abruptly in a tangle of shredded nylon, the result of falling ice from above. A decision had to be made. Luca's Sherpa, Tenzing, wanted to retreat. The weather looked too calm, and every veteran knows, calm means danger. But Luca refused. "We've come too far," he said. "If we turn back now, we'll never forgive ourselves." That's the exact thought that kills so many on K2. They continued climbing into the night. At 2 a.m. the slope turned to blue ice, and the temperature dropped to 35 degrees Celsius. Frost formed on their eyelashes. Their breaths sounded like broken glass. And then, through the swirling snow, they saw it. A shape. At first it looked like a rock, but as their headlamps flickered closer, they realized it wasn't. It was him. Muhammad Hassan, still hanging there encased in ice, frozen mid-fall, his face pale and hollow behind his mask. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Tenzing crossed himself, whispering a prayer. But Luca stared longer, transfixed, terrified, and almost ashamed. "We walk past death like it's scenery," he murmured, "like it's part of the route." That night, K2 took its toll. An avalanche thundered down from the seracs, shaking the entire bottleneck. The team threw themselves flat against the ice as chunks the size of cars crashed around them. Their ropes were torn again, tents buried, food lost. By dawn, they were trapped above 8,000 meters, the death zone. No rescue, no descent, no hope but the will to keep moving. Luca's oxygen ran out first. He began gasping, clawing at his mask. The world around him started to shimmer, white, endless, dreamlike. He said he could hear music, bells, voices calling his name. "Do you hear that?" he whispered to Tenzing. "Someone's singing." But there was nothing, only wind. Hours later, when Tenzing looked back, Luca was gone. No scream, no movement, just gone. He was found days later, sitting upright near the bottleneck, his hand reaching toward the summit. His eyes were open, and his camera was still recording. When rescuers recovered the footage weeks later, the last thing Luca said before the camera cut out was, "The mountain watches, it waits, it remembers." That clip went viral. Millions watched, millions commented. But no one understood what those words really meant until another storm came. Because K2 doesn't just take lives, it keeps stories. And every time someone climbs it, they become part of that memory. Another voice whispering through the wind. The storm arrived without warning. One moment the air was eerily calm, a white stillness so pure it felt sacred. The next, the sky tore open. Wind slammed down from the summit like an invisible hammer. Snow whipped sideways, turning day into night in seconds. Radio chatter vanished beneath static. Tents snapped like paper. And the remaining climbers, scattered between Camp 4 and the bottleneck, realized the truth. K2 wasn't letting anyone down easily this time. Tenzing was one of them. He crouched behind a block of ice, his oxygen tank half empty, clutching the frozen rope that had once led to Luca. He hadn't slept in 30 hours. His fingers bled through his gloves, and the wind howled like it wanted his name erased from the world. He whispered a single line, something he'd heard from another Sherpa long ago. K2 doesn't kill people. It waits for them to kill themselves. Below him, another team, 4 climbers from Poland, were trying to descend, dragging one of their teammates who'd fallen and shattered his leg. They moved slowly, inch by inch, like ghosts crawling through the snow. And that's when it happened. The fourth fall. A chunk of overhanging ice broke loose above the bottleneck, crashing straight onto the route. The impact was like an explosion, a roar that echoed down the mountain and up through every radio still alive. When the snow cleared, there was nothing left where the Polish team had been, only ropes, cut clean. Tenzing turned away. He knew what came next. Hours passed. No rescue could reach them. No helicopter could fly that high, not in that storm. The only direction left was down, into the unknown. But then, through the blizzard, a faint light appeared, a flicker moving across the slope below. At first, Tenzing thought it was another climber, then another light, then 3, then 10. Voices on the radio crackled. "Who's still up there? We see headlamps near the bottleneck. Are they alive?" They weren't. They were the reflections of helmets, half buried under ice. The light wasn't coming from them. It was moonlight on them. The storm raged for 30 hours. When it cleared, base camp counted the missing. 7 gone, 2 never found. And once again, the world asked the same question. Why do people still climb this mountain? Days later, a Sherpa team ascended to recover what they could. They found Luca's camera. They found Tenzing's ice axe. And near Camp 4, frozen into the snow, they found a page torn from Luca's journal. Only one sentence was visible, written in shaky handwriting. "Maybe the real summit is surviving yourself." Those words hit harder than any documentary, any interview, any data point about risk. Because deep down, every climber knows, you don't go to K2 to conquer it. You go to confront something inside you, something wild, broken, unfinished. But the mountain doesn't care about your reasons. It listens, it watches, it waits, and sometimes it answers. 2 nights after the recovery, as the porters prepared to leave base camp, a strange thing happened. Wind swept down the glacier, slow and steady, and every flag at the memorial began to move in unison. Hundreds of names carved into stone fluttered under the moonlight, like voices whispering the same story again and again. We were here. That's when the realization hit everyone present. Climbers, Sherpas, cameramen, all of them standing silent under the shadow of the savage mountain. K2 wasn't just a mountain. It was a mirror, and everyone who dared to face it saw exactly who they were before they died. Weeks later, the storm had passed. The camps were gone, the tents shredded, the slopes wiped clean as if the mountain had erased every trace of what happened. Only the memorial stones remained, silent witnesses carved with names, dates, and dreams that never made it home. One by one, the surviving porters packed up to leave base camp. But before they went, Tenzing, somehow still alive, frostbitten and broken, walked to the edge of the glacier and looked up. K2's summit glimmered under the fading light, calm again, majestic, indifferent. He whispered softly, "You win, old friend." Then he turned and began the long walk back toward civilization, his boots crunching through the snow, each step echoing the cost of every choice made above the clouds. The world would talk about it for months. Documentaries, news headlines, endless debates about ethics, gear, and glory. But those who had truly been there, they knew something no camera could ever capture. K2 isn't about the mountain. It's about us. The madness, the pride, the need to prove we can stand where others fall. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the savage mountain feeds on. Not bodies, but belief. Because every year, no matter how many die, new climbers return, chasing the same summit, the same dream, the same whisper that once lured the others. And every time they do, K2 remembers. It remembers every breath, every scream, every promise broken to the wind. It doesn't take revenge. It doesn't forgive. It simply waits. So if you ever find yourself staring at that jagged pyramid of ice and stone, remember this. It's not just a mountain. It's a mirror. And whatever you take up there, pride, pain, guilt, or greed, it will show it back to you 1,000 times over. If this story left you thinking, if it made your heart race or your stomach twist, then don't just scroll away. Join us here at K2 Stories, where every mountain has a memory and every climber leaves a ghost behind. Because the next time we return to K2, the mountain will still be watching,